Rogers gestured toward the human fleet, visible through Velkar's office window. Then you'll discover what 6 centuries of human innovation can accomplish when properly motivated. Across the galaxy, the response was immediate. On world after world, oppressed peoples rose up against their council governors. But they were not alone. Human ships protected them from retaliation. Human technology provided them with weapons and shields to defend their freedom. The Velkari were among the first to rebel. Within hours of the human arrival, they had seized control of their planet's government. The crystal forests that had been strip-mined for centuries began to grow again, nurtured by human environmental technology. Other species followed quickly. The Andorians, enslaved for 2,000 years, declared independence with human ships protecting their world. The Telari, whose home system had been turned into a prison camp, found themselves free for the first time in living memory. The Council's response was swift and predictable. They sent their fleets to crush the rebellions. But wherever Council ships appeared, they found human vessels waiting for them. Battles that should have been massacres became impossible fights against opponents who seemed to bend the laws of physics. Dr. Lisa Kim watched the liberation of the galaxy from the command center on Earth. Around her, displays showed human fleets protecting dozens of worlds. The Fold Space Communication Network allowed instant coordination across the entire galaxy. Status report, Kim requested. 87 worlds have declared independence, reported her aide. Human fleets are protecting all of them. Council forces are retreating from most sectors. Kim smiled. This was exactly what her mother and grandmother had planned. Humanity had not returned as conquerors, but as liberators. They were using their overwhelming technological advantage not to rule, but to ensure that others could rule themselves. On his small ship, Captain Jake Morrison watched in amazement as human vessels appeared around him. Admiral Mitchell herself contacted him directly. "Captain Morrison," she said, "we've been waiting 60 years to thank you and your crew. You kept the human spirit alive in the galaxy when everyone thought we were gone." Morrison felt tears in his eyes. "Admiral, I never thought I'd live to see this day." "Would you like to come home?" Mitchell asked. Earth would be honored to welcome back its lost children. Morrison looked around his small patched ship and his aging crew. They had fought and hidden and survived for 60 years, keeping hope alive when hope seemed impossible. Now they could finally rest. "Yes," Morrison said, "we'd like to come home." 1 year later, Dr. Lisa Kim stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at a galaxy that had been transformed. The Galactic Council had disbanded after most of its member species declared independence. In its place, a new alliance was forming, based on cooperation rather than domination. The first meeting of the Galactic Free People's Assembly was scheduled to take place on Earth in 6 months. Representatives from 200 independent worlds would gather to discuss trade, cooperation, and mutual defense. "Dr. Kim," said her assistant, approaching with a data pad. "The latest reports from the exploration fleets are in." Kim took the pad and read through the reports. Human ships were exploring regions of the galaxy that had been forbidden under Council rule. They were making contact with species that had been isolated for millennia. The galaxy was bigger and more diverse than anyone had imagined. "What about the Zeridians?" Kim asked. "Most of their worlds have chosen to join the new alliance," her assistant replied. "They're adapting to democracy better than expected. Even Ambassador Velkar has agreed to participate in the peace negotiations." Kim nodded. That was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement. They had not sought revenge against their former oppressors. Instead, they had offered them the same freedom. They had given everyone else. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Kim activated the communication system and saw President Miller's face appear on the screen. "Dr. Kim," Miller said, "I wanted to personally thank you and your family. Without the Terra field, without the time it gave us to grow and develop, none of this would have been possible. Kim smiled. Mr. President, we didn't just buy time. We bought hope. Hope that beings could be free, that technology could be used to help rather than oppress, and that even the smallest species could make a difference in the galaxy. As Kim spoke, she looked out at the stars. They seemed brighter now, as if the galaxy itself was celebrating its newfound freedom. The Terra field was gone, but its legacy lived on in every world that chose its own path. Humanity had sealed its gates and emerged as something the galaxy had never seen before. Not conquerors, but protectors. Not rulers, but teachers. They had made the stars themselves tremble, not with fear, but with the promise of a better future for all who lived among them. The Terra field collapsed in a burst of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. The barrier that had hidden humanity for 60 years simply vanished, like a soap bubble popping in the wind. For the first time in 6 decades, the Sol system was visible to the galaxy again. Admiral Nexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at his sensors in complete shock. Where he had expected to see the primitive human system he remembered, there was something impossible. The Sol system had been transformed into a fortress beyond his understanding. Report, Nexton ordered, his voice shaking. Sir, his science. Officer said, I'm reading massive orbital platforms around every planet. They're bigger than our largest space stations. And the energy signatures are off the charts. Nexton looked at the main view screen. Earth was still there, but it was surrounded by rings of metal and crystal that sparkled with their own light. Mars glowed green and blue like a garden world. Even the dead rocks of the asteroid belt pulsed with the energy of countless machines. What? About ships? Nexton asked. That's the problem, sir. I'm not detecting any ships at all. Before Nexton could respond, space itself seemed to tear open around his fleet. Ships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the Galactic Council blockade in seconds. These were not the crude human vessels he remembered. They were sleek and beautiful, their hulls seeming to flow like liquid metal. The largest ship appeared directly in front of Nexton's flagship. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of his own vessel. Strange symbols glowed along its sides, and energy crackled between wing-like projections. Incoming transmission, announced his communications officer. Put it through, Nexton said. The view screen changed to show the bridge of the human ship. A woman in a crisp blue uniform stood at the center, her posture confident and calm. This was Admiral Carol Mitchell, commander of the UES Liberation. I am Admiral Mitchell of the United Earth Fleet, she said. You have maintained a blockade of our system for 60 years. That blockade ends now. Nexton found his voice. I am Admiral Nexton of the Galactic Council Navy. You will stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded. Mitchell smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. Admiral, I don't think you understand the situation. Your fleet is completely surrounded. Your weapons are useless against our shields. And your government no longer has any authority over humanity. That's impossible, Nexton said. Humans are a primitive species. You've only been in space for a few centuries. We were primitive, Mitchell agreed. 60 years ago, when you tried to make us slaves. But we've had 600 years to grow, to learn, to become something your species has never encountered. Nexton stared at her. 600 years? You've only been isolated for 60 years. Time moves differently inside the Terra field. Mitchell explained. While you waited outside our barrier, we experienced 10 times as much time. We used every moment of it. To prove her point, Mitchell gave a simple hand signal. Around Nexton's fleet, the human ships did something impossible. They simply vanished and reappeared in different positions, moving faster than light without. Using hyperlanes. How is that possible? Nexthen whispered. "We learned to fold space itself," Mitchell said. "We don't need your hyperlanes anymore. We can go anywhere in the galaxy instantly." At that moment, across the entire galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships appeared simultaneously in orbit around every major council world. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands. An entire fleet had materialized from nowhere, appearing at the same instant everywhere that mattered. On the Galactic Council home world, Ambassador Velkar stood in his office, watching reports flood in. From across his empire, human ships were everywhere, appearing faster than his forces could respond. "How many ships?" he demanded of his aide. "We've confirmed sightings around every major world," Kex Valoom replied. "Conservative estimates suggest at least 10,000 vessels." Velkar felt his blood turn cold. The entire Galactic Council Navy had only 8,000 ships, and they were scattered across hundreds of systems. Somehow, humanity had built a fleet larger than the rest of the galaxy combined. "Are they attacking?" Velkar asked. "No, my lord. They're just sitting there, waiting." At that moment, every communication network in the galaxy received the same message. It came through quantum broadcast, bypassing all security systems and council sensors. The message was simple, but it changed everything. "People of the galaxy, humanity has returned. The age of the Galactic Council's tyranny is over. Every species has the right to choose its own path. We will guarantee that right." The message was signed by President John Miller of the New Earth Collective. On the enslaved world of Volcara, old Decaron looked up at the sky and saw human ships hanging like new stars above his planet. Around him, other Valkyrie were emerging. From their homes, pointing at the sky and whispering the ancient words of prophecy. "The sealed ones have returned," Decaron said, tears running down his weathered face. "The chains will be broken at last." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On 100 oppressed worlds, beings who had lived under council rule for centuries saw hope for the first time. The humans had returned, and they had kept their promise. But humanity was not seeking conquest. Admiral Steve Rogers, who commanded the human fleet at the council home world, made that clear in his transmission to Velkar. "Ambassador," Rogers said, his voice calm but firm, "we did not return to rule the galaxy. We returned to free it. The Council's authority over member species ends today." Velkar appeared on Rogers' screen, his ancient face twisted with rage. "You cannot simply declare our government ended. We have ruled for thousands of years." "And your rule was built on fear and oppression," Rogers replied. "That ends now. Every species will be free to choose its own government, its own path, its own future. And if we refuse?" Captain Jake Morrison was now an old man, but his eyes were still sharp as he stood on the bridge of his ship. The Freedom's call. 60 years had passed since the Terra field had sealed Earth away from the galaxy. Morrison and his crew were the last free humans outside the barrier, living as rebels and pirates on the edge of known space. His ship was small and old, patched together from salvaged parts. His crew was made up of humans who had escaped before the sealing, plus their children and grandchildren. They were all that remained of humanity in the wider galaxy. "Captain," called his communications officer, Lieutenant Dave Parker, "I'm picking up something strange, a signal that shouldn't be possible." Morrison walked over to Parker's station. "What kind of signal?" "It's coming from inside the Terra field," Parker said, his voice filled with wonder. "But that's impossible. Nothing can get through that barrier." On Parker's screen, a message was slowly forming. The words appeared one by one, as if someone was typing them in real time. "Humanity remembers. Humanity is ready. Stand clear." Morrison stared at the message. His hands were shaking. "After 60 years of silence, Earth was finally speaking to. A galaxy again. How is this reaching us? Morrison asked. Parker checked his instruments. According to these readings, the signal isn't coming through normal space. It's coming through folded space, bypassing the barrier entirely. Morrison had never heard of folded space technology. No species in the galaxy could do such a thing. Send a reply. Tell them we're still here. Parker worked at his console for several minutes, then shook his head. I can't send anything back the same way. Whatever technology they're using, we don't have it. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Velkar sat in his office on the Galactic Council's home world. He was ancient now, even by Zeridian standards. His blue skin was wrinkled, and his 4 arms moved slowly. But he was still the most powerful being in the galaxy. For 60 years. He had ruled the Council with an iron fist. The other species had learned to fear the Zeridians. Any world that disobeyed was quickly brought back into line. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had ever been, though it was the peace of fear. My lord, said his aide, a younger Zeridian, named Kexvalum, we're receiving strange reports from the Sol system. Velkar looked up from his desk. What kind of reports? The blockade ships are detecting energy fluctuations from inside the barrier. And there are sensor readings that don't. Make sense. Ships appearing and disappearing near the field. Velkar frowned. That's impossible. Nothing can get through the Terra field. That's what we thought, Kexvalum said. But the readings are consistent across multiple ships. Something is happening in there. Velkar stood up slowly and walked to the window of his office. He could see the capital city of the Council stretching out below him. Millions of beings from dozens of species lived and worked under Zeridian rule. It was a perfect empire, built on the foundation of human absence. Double the blockade, Velkar ordered. Whatever the humans are doing, we must be ready. On a distant world called Velkara, an old alien named Thekaran told stories to his grandchildren. The Velkari had been enslaved by the Zeridians for 300 years. Their world was beautiful once, covered in crystal forests and singing rivers. Now it was gray and dead, strip-mined for resources to feed the Council's war machine. Tell us about the sealed ones, grandfather, said a young Velkari child. Thekaran smiled sadly. Long ago, before the Zeridians ruled the galaxy, our people had a prophecy. It said that one day, a species would seal itself away from the galaxy to grow in secret. When they returned, they would break the chains that bound all free peoples. Do you think the humans are the sealed ones? Asked another child. Thekaran looked up at the night sky, where distant stars twinkled through the polluted atmosphere. I hope so, little one. I hope so. In the deep space networks that connected the galaxy's computers, something strange was happening. The artificial intelligence systems that managed trade, communication, and transportation were detecting patterns. In space-time itself, these patterns suggested that something massive was about to occur. The AI networks tried to understand what they were seeing, but the mathematics were beyond anything in their databases. Space itself seemed to be preparing for a change that would affect the entire galaxy. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Kim stood in the control room of the Terra field generators. Around her, technicians worked frantically as warning lights flashed on every panel. The field that had protected humanity for 6 centuries was finally failing. Field strength is down to 60% and falling, reported the chief engineer. The quantum resonance is becoming unstable. Kim nodded. This was all part of the plan her mother had designed. The Terra field was never meant to last forever. It was a cocoon, and humanity was ready to emerge as something completely different. Begin the controlled shutdown sequence, Kim ordered. I want this collapse to be visible from halfway across the galaxy. At the same time, General Mark Davis stood in the military command center on Mars. He was the great-grandson of General Kate Thompson, and he had inherited her tactical genius. Around him, displays showed the positions of human fleets throughout the solar system. "All ships report ready," announced his aide, Colonel Brian Stone. "A new fleet is in position and waiting for orders." Davis looked at the displays showing humanity's new warships. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Sleek hulls that seemed to be made of liquid metal, weapons that could bend space itself, shields that could turn solid matter into energy. "Remember," Davis said to his officers, "we are not returning to the galaxy as conquerors. We are returning as liberators. Every action we take must prove that humanity has changed." On the edge of the solar system, the terror field began to pulse with increasing intensity. The Galactic Council ships that had maintained their blockade for 60 years suddenly found their sensors going crazy. Admiral Nexton, the great-grandson of the original blockade commander, stared at his instruments in disbelief. "What are those energy readings?" "Unknown, sir," replied his science officer. "The barrier is fluctuating in ways we've never seen before." "Are the humans trying to communicate?" "I don't think so, sir. I think they're preparing to come out." Inside the Terra field, Dr. Kim made the final preparations for humanity's return to the galaxy. But this would not be a simple dropping of the barrier. Humanity would announce their return in a way that no one could ignore or misunderstand. Dr. Kim called her assistant. "The Fold Space Drive network is ready. We can now place ships anywhere in the galaxy simultaneously." Kim smiled. The technology that her mother had started developing was now perfected. Human ships could appear in orbit around any world in the galaxy at the exact same moment. No hyperlanes, no travel time, no warning. "What about our message to the free peoples of the galaxy?" Kim asked. "The quantum broadcast system is ready," her assistant replied. "We can send signals to every oppressed species simultaneously, bypassing all council communication networks." Kim looked at the countdown timer on her screen. In less than 24 hours, the Terra field would collapse completely. Humanity would step back into the galaxy after 6 centuries of isolation, but they would not step back as the same species that had been threatened and bullied 60 years ago. They would return as something the galaxy had never seen before, something that would make the stars themselves tremble. "Begin the final countdown," Kim ordered, "and send word to Admiral Carol Mitchell. Tell her to prepare the Liberation Fleet for immediate deployment." Across the galaxy, sensitive instruments began to detect something impossible. Space-time itself was rippling, as if something massive was about to tear through the fabric of reality. The artificial intelligence networks sent warnings to their creators, but no one understood what the warnings meant. On a dozen different worlds, oppressed peoples looked up at the sky and felt something change. The old Valkyrie prophecies spoke of this moment. The sealed ones were about to return. Ambassador Velkar stood in his office, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Something was happening, something beyond his understanding or control. For the first time in 60 years, the Zeridian leader felt afraid. "My lord," said his aide, "should we prepare the fleet for battle?" Velkar looked out at his perfect empire and realized that perfection was about to end. "Prepare every ship we have. If the humans are truly returning, then everything is about to change." In the darkness of space, Captain Morrison received one final message from inside the Terra field. "The gates are opening. Welcome to the new galaxy." 100 years had passed since the Terra field sealed Earth away from the galaxy. Dr. Alex Bennett was now very old, his hair completely white and his hands shaking. But his mind was still sharp as he walked through the new Geneva research center on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The center was bigger than any city that had existed on old Earth. Glass domes stretched for miles across the icy surface, filled with laboratories, factories, and homes for millions of people. Inside the domes, the air was warm and clean. Trees grew in parks between the buildings. Children played in gardens that should have been impossible on this frozen moon. Dr. Bennett called a young woman hurrying to catch up with him. This was Dr. Paul Kim, his replacement as head of the research division. Kim was brilliant, even more so than Bennett had been at her age. The fusion reactor tests are complete. We've achieved stable power output and 97% efficiency. Bennett smiled. When he was young, fusion power had been a dream. Now it was as common as the electricity that had once powered old Earth. Every human world, every space station, every ship ran on clean fusion energy. What about the artificial intelligence project? Bennett asked. The new AI systems are operating at levels we never thought possible, Kim said. They can solve problems in minutes that would take human scientists years to figure out. But they still follow human commands perfectly. Bennett nodded. That had been the key breakthrough 50 years ago. Other species in the galaxy had created artificial intelligence, but they had always been slaves to their machines or destroyed by them. Humans had found a different path. Their AI systems were partners, not masters or servants. They walked past a laboratory where scientists were working on something that would have seemed like magic to the old Earth. Genetic engineering had advanced so far that human diseases were now only found in history books. People lived for 200 years or more, staying young and healthy almost to the end. How is General Thompson's project coming along? Bennett asked. Kim's expression became serious. The military simulations are producing incredible results. Without real wars to fight, they've perfected combat through pure theory and computer modeling. The new weapons and tactics they've developed are unlike anything that has ever existed. General, Kate Thompson had taken over military operations when Earth was sealed. She was now over 150 years old, but looked no older than 40 thanks to genetic treatments. Her greatest achievement was not building bigger weapons or faster ships. It was changing how humans thought about war itself. In the Military Command Center on Mars, General Thompson stood before a massive holographic display showing a battle simulation. The humans fighting in the simulation moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons hit targets that seemed impossible to reach. Their tactics adapted to enemy movements faster than any living mind could think. Run scenario 712, Thompson ordered. The simulation changed. Now the human forces faced an enemy with overwhelming numbers and superior technology. In the old days, this would have been certain defeat. But the simulated human forces did something unexpected. They broke into small groups and disappeared. When the enemy moved forward to claim victory, the human forces reappeared behind them. The superior technology meant nothing when it was attacking empty space. The overwhelming numbers became a weakness when they were scattered and confused. Simulation complete, announced the computer. Human forces achieved total victory with 0 casualties. Thompson smiled. This was the 712th different scenario she had tested, and humans had won every single one. Not through brute force or better weapons, but through thinking differently than any enemy could predict. On Earth, the changes were even more dramatic. Commander Steve Rogers walked through the streets of New York City, but it was not the city his great-grandfather had known. Buildings reached into the sky like crystal towers, their walls transparent and glowing with soft light. Plants grew on every surface, cleaning the air and providing food. Rogers was part of the first generation born after the sealing. He had never seen the stars the way they really looked. To him, the strange sky inside the terra field was normal. He and others like him grew up hearing stories of alien oppression and human defiance. These stories shaped them in ways their parents could not understand. "Commander," said his aide, Lieutenant Amy White. She was the granddaughter of Director. Nancy White, who had announced the sealing to the world. The council meeting is ready to begin. Rogers entered the New Earth Collective building, where representatives from every human world gathered to make decisions. This government was unlike anything that had existed before. It combined the best, parts of every political system humans had ever tried, while avoiding their weaknesses. Helen Davis, now over 200 years old but still sharp as a knife, stood before the assembly. She had helped create this new form of government, and she was proud of what humanity had accomplished. "Fellow humans," Davis said, "today marks the 300th anniversary of our isolation. We have achieved things that our ancestors could never have imagined." On the screens around the room, images showed the progress humanity had made. Mars was now a green world with oceans and forests. Venus had been cooled and given a breathable atmosphere. The asteroid belt was filled with mining stations and factories that produced more goods than old Earth had ever dreamed of. "But our greatest achievement," Davis continued, "is not our technology or our cities. It is what we have become as a people." She was right. The humans inside the Terra field were different from their ancestors. They were stronger, smarter, and more united. They had no wars among themselves because they had learned to solve problems before they became conflicts. They had no poverty because their technology could provide everything anyone needed. Doctor Paul Kim stood in her laboratory on Europa, working on the project that would change everything. For 200 years, humans had been trapped inside the Terra field, cut off from the galaxy. But Kim had found a way to break the rules of space itself. Dr. Kim called her assistant, Dr. Lisa Kim, who was also her daughter. "The Fold Space Drive test is ready." Kim looked at the small device on her workbench. It was no bigger than a book, but it contained technology that could move a ship across the galaxy instantly. Not through the hyperlanes that other species used, but through folded space itself. "Begin the test," Kim said. A small probe, no bigger than a basketball, appeared on the testing platform. Kim activated the Fold Space Drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the probe simply vanished. "Probe has successfully jumped to the target coordinates," announced the computer. Distance traveled, 50 million kilometers. Time elapsed, 0.03 seconds. Kim smiled. The other species in the galaxy moved through space using hyperlanes, like roads between the stars. But humans had just learned to step outside of space entirely and appear wherever they wanted to go. "Run a full analysis," Kim ordered. "I want to know if we can scale this up to move entire ships." Her daughter nodded and began working at her. "Computer, Mother, if this works, we could explore the galaxy without using their hyperlanes. We could go anywhere we wanted. That's the idea," Kim said. "But more importantly, when the Terra field finally comes down, we'll be able to reach every part of the galaxy at the same time. No one will be able to hide from us or escape our reach." Outside the Terra field, the Galactic Council still maintained their blockade around the solar system. Admiral Zexthin had been replaced by his son, who had been replaced by his son. 3 generations of alien commanders had stared at the impenetrable barrier, waiting for it to fail. But inside the barrier, something was changing. The field itself was beginning to pulse with increasing frequency. Energy readings that had been stable for centuries were starting to fluctuate. Dr. Lisa Kim, now the head of the research division after her mother's death, stood before the Terra Field Control Center. Around her, technicians monitored the massive generators that had kept humanity isolated for 600 years. "Field stability is decreasing," reported Maria Rodriguez's great-granddaughter, who had inherited her ancestors' skill with machines. "The generators are showing signs of planned obsolescence." Kim nodded. Her mother had programmed the Terra field to eventually shut down on its own. The time of isolation was almost over, How long do we have? Kim asked. Based on current degradation rates, the field will collapse within the next 10 years. Kim looked around the control room at the faces of her team. They were all descendants of the people who had built the Terra field. They had been born into isolation, but they would live to see humanity return to the galaxy. Then we need to prepare, Kim said. When the field comes down, the galaxy needs to understand that humanity is no longer the same species they tried to control. We are something new, something they have never seen before. She walked to the window and looked up at the strange sky of their isolated pocket of space. Soon, that sky would show the real stars again, and when it did, those stars would tremble at what humanity had become. Dr. Alex Bennett stood in the main control room deep beneath the surface of Mars. Around him, dozens of technicians worked at computer stations, their fingers flying over keyboards. Red warning lights flashed on every wall. The room hummed with the sound of massive generators spinning up to full power. Field generator stations reporting ready, called out Maria Rodriguez from her position at the main control panel. She was Bennett's best engineer, a woman who could fix anything and build machines that seemed impossible. Her hands moved quickly over the controls as data flowed across her screens. Bennett looked at the holographic display floating in the center of the room. It showed the entire solar system with Earth at the center. Scattered around the system were 37 field generator stations. Some were built on asteroids. Others floated in space between planets. A few were hidden on moons that no one paid attention to. Dr. Bennett, came a voice from another station. Ryan Clark, their systems analyst, looked up from his computer. I'm getting confirmation signals from all stations. Power levels are optimal. The quantum field resonators are synchronized. Bennett nodded. 10 years of secret work had led to this moment. While the rest of humanity worried about alien politics and trade agreements, his team had been building something that would change everything. The Terra field generator was his life's work. Begin the activation sequence, Bennett said. Rodriguez pressed a series of buttons. Initiating field generation in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Across the solar system, massive machines that had been hidden for years began to wake up. On a small asteroid near Jupiter, a structure the size of a city started to glow with blue energy. On the far side of the moon, another generator sent pulses of power into space. Near the edge of the system, where Pluto orbited in the cold darkness, the largest generator of all began to spin. Field generation has begun, Rodriguez announced. Energy output is climbing. Bennett watched the holographic display as lines of light appeared between the generator stations. They formed a complex pattern, like a web made of pure energy. The web grew larger and larger, reaching out from the inner planets toward the edge of the solar system. Outside the growing field, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance. His ship was on patrol near Neptune when the first pulses of energy appeared on their sensors. Captain, called Lieutenant Rachel Stone from her communication station, I'm detecting massive energy readings from all over the system. It looks like some kind of coordinated activation. Morrison moved to the sensor station. He could see the energy patterns on the screen, growing stronger every second. How long until it reaches us? The sensor officer, a young man named Pete Wilson, checked his readings. At current expansion rate, about 30 minutes. Morrison felt a chill. Whatever Earth was doing, his ship was caught on the wrong side of it. Open a channel to Sol Command. Emergency frequency. I can't get through, Stone said, working frantically at her console. There's too much interference from the energy field. On the main view screen, Morrison could see it now. A wall of shimmering blue light was moving toward them through space. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The wall stretched in every direction, completely surrounding the solar system. "All stop," Morrison ordered. "Move us back to a safe distance." The Defiance's engines fired, pushing the ship away from the approaching barrier. But it was moving too fast. The wall of energy caught up to them in minutes. Morrison watched in amazement as the barrier passed through his ship. For a moment, everything went white. Every screen flickered. Every light dimmed. Morrison felt like he was falling through empty space. Then everything returned to normal. But when Morrison looked at the view screen, the stars were different. The familiar patterns were gone, replaced by something else entirely. "Report," Morrison said, his voice shaky. Wilson stared at his sensors. "Captain, according to these readings, we're no longer in normal space. We're somewhere else entirely." "What do you mean?" "The barrier didn't just block us from the galaxy," Wilson said. "It moved us. We're in a pocket of space-time that exists separately from the rest of the universe." Inside the barrier, on Earth, Director Nancy White stood before the cameras in the Global Communications Network building. She was a calm woman with gray hair who had spent her life delivering news to the world. Today, she had to tell humanity that everything had changed forever. "Citizens of Earth and all human worlds," White said, looking directly into the camera. "As of 30 minutes ago, the Terra field has been successfully activated. We are now completely isolated from the galactic community." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Around the world, people watch their screens in silence. No signals can enter or leave our solar system," White continued. "No ships can cross the barrier in either direction. We are alone in the universe." In his laboratory on Mars, Dr. Bennett watched the broadcast on a small screen while his team ran diagnostics on the field generators. The activation had worked perfectly, better than he had hoped. "Dr. Bennett," Maria Rodriguez called to him. "You need to see this." Bennett walked over to her station. On her screen was a complex readout showing the rate of time passage inside the barrier compared to outside. "The time compression is working exactly as predicted," Rodriguez said. "For every year that passes in the galaxy, we will experience about 10 years inside the barrier." Bennett smiled. This was the secret he had not shared with the Earth Assembly. A Terra field did more than just protect them from outside threats. It gave humanity something more valuable than any weapon or defense system. It gave them time. "That means while the galaxy thinks we've been isolated for 60 years, Bennett said, we will actually experience 600 years of development." Rodriguez nodded. 600 years to grow, to learn, to become something the galaxy has never seen. On Earth, President Katie Sullivan stood in the Emergency Command Center beneath the Capitol building. Around her, military officers and government officials watched screens showing the status of human worlds throughout the system. "All colonies are reporting normal conditions," announced General Kate Thompson, the head of military operations. "The field is stable. Life support systems are functioning normally on all worlds." Sullivan nodded. "What about our resources?" "We have 60 years of stockpiled materials," Thompson said. "Food, fuel, raw materials for manufacturing. After that, we'll need to be completely self-sufficient." "Then we have work to do," Sullivan said. "As of right now, humanity is on its own. We need to make sure that when we emerge from this isolation, we're stronger than when we went in." Outside the barrier, the first Galactic Council ships began to arrive at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Zexton, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms, commanded the largest war fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. He had come expecting to crush human resistance in a matter of hours. Instead, he found something impossible. The entire solar system was surrounded by a barrier that his ships could not penetrate. Energy weapons had no effect. Physical projectiles simply disappeared when they touched the field. "Report," Zexton demanded from his command chair. The barrier appears to be impenetrable, his science officer replied. We've tried everything in our arsenal. Nothing can break through. Zexton stared at the shimmering wall that hid the human system from view. How is this possible? Humans are a primitive species. They've only been in space for a few centuries. I don't know, Admiral, the science officer said. But whatever technology they're using, it's beyond anything in our databases. Inside the barrier, Dr. Bennett stood at the window of his laboratory, looking up at the night sky of Mars. The stars looked different now, but that was fine. Humanity no longer needed the old stars. Maria, he called to Rodriguez, begin Phase 2 of the project. What's Phase 2? She asked. Bennett smiled. We're going to build a civilization that will make the galaxy tremble when we return. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship was on patrol near the edge of human space, far from Earth. It was supposed to be a routine mission. Nothing ever happened. Out here in the empty space between star systems, the communication console beeped. Morrison turned to look at his communications officer, Lieutenant Rachel Stone. She was frowning at her screen, pressing buttons and adjusting settings. Captain, I'm getting an emergency signal from Sol Command, Stone said. Her voice was tight, with worry. Admiral Lisa Carter wants to speak with you right away. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Emergency signals from Earth were never good news. The last time he had received one, pirates had attacked a human colony. Before that, it was news of a war starting with an alien species called the Hegemony. Put her through, Morrison said. The view screen changed from stars to the face of Admiral Carter. She looked tired and angry. Her gray hair was messy, like she had been running her hands through it. Her uniform was wrinkled. Morrison had never seen the Admiral look so worried. Jake, I need you to listen carefully, Carter said without any greeting. The Galactic Council has just delivered an ultimatum to Earth. We have 72 hours to respond. Morrison felt his blood go cold. The Galactic Council ruled most of the galaxy. They were made up of dozens of alien species, but everyone knew the Zeridians were really in charge. Humans had been members of the Council for only 50 years, and they were treated like children by the older species. What do they want? Morrison asked. Everything, Carter said. Her voice was bitter. They want us to surrender all our military. Ships. They want us to accept what they call protective oversight. That means alien governors on every human world. And they want 80% of Earth's population relocated to colonies on the edge of the galaxy. Morrison stared at the screen. He could not believe what he was hearing. They want to take our people away from Earth? That's exactly what they want, Carter said. They say humans are too dangerous, too unpredictable. They claim our technology is advancing too fast, and it threatens galactic stability. Morrison knew what Carter was talking about. Human scientists had been making breakthrough discoveries every few years. While other species took centuries to develop new technology, humans did it in decades. The aliens were scared of human progress. What's our response going to be? Morrison asked. That's being decided right now, Carter said. President Katie Sullivan has called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Every representative from every human world is joining the discussion. The screen went dark for a moment, then showed a new image. Morrison was now looking at the assembly hall on Earth. Hundreds of people sat in curved rows of seats, all facing a central platform. The noise was incredible. Everyone seemed to be talking at once. President Sullivan stood at the center platform. She was a small woman with brown hair, but she had a strong voice that carried over the crowd. She raised her hand, and the noise slowly died down. Citizens of Earth and all human worlds, Sullivan said, we face the greatest crisis in human history. The Galactic Council demands our surrender in all but name. They want to control our lives, our worlds, and our future. An old man stood up in the audience. Morrison recognized him as Dr. Alex Bennett, Earth's most famous scientist. Bennett had wild gray hair and thick glasses. He always wore old sweaters that looked like his grandmother had made them. "Madam President," Bennett said, "I need to tell the Assembly about something we've been working on in secret. Something the aliens don't know about." The hall went completely quiet. Morrison leaned forward, watching closely. "For the past 10 years," Bennett continued, "we have been building the Terra Field Generator. It's a planetary defense system, unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. We can create a barrier around our entire solar system. Nothing can get in. Nothing can get out." The crowd exploded in noise again. Some people were excited, others were scared. Morrison heard someone shout about being trapped. Another person yelled about showing the aliens what humans could do. President Sullivan raised her hand again. "Dr. Bennett, explain what this means." Bennett nodded. "If we activate the Terra field, Earth and all our worlds in this system will be completely cut off from the galaxy. No ships, no signals, no contact at all. We would be alone." "For how long?" someone called out. Bennett hesitated. "We're not sure we can reverse it once it's activated." The hall fell silent again. Morrison felt his heart beating fast. Cut off from the galaxy forever. It was a frightening idea. "But," Bennett said, his voice getting stronger, "the field does something else. It compresses time. While 60 years pass in the galaxy, we would experience about 600 years inside the barrier. We would have time to develop, to grow, to become something the galaxy has never seen before." An older woman stood up. Morrison knew her as Director Nancy White from the Global Communications Network. "Dr. Bennett, you're talking about isolating humanity completely. We would have no allies, no trade, no help from anyone." "That's right," Bennett said. "But we would also have no masters." President Sullivan looked around the hall. "The choice is simple but terrible. We can submit to the Council's demands and become a controlled species little better than slaves. Or we can activate the Terra field and face the unknown alone." The debate went on for hours. Morrison watched representatives argue back and forth. Some wanted to fight the Council directly. Others wanted to negotiate. A few wanted to accept the demands and hope for better treatment later. Finally, President Sullivan called for a vote. Morrison held his breath as the numbers appeared on the screen. It was close, but the result was clear. Humanity chose defiance. Sullivan stood up slowly. Her face was pale but determined. "Dr. Bennett, prepare the Terra field generator for immediate activation. We will not submit to alien control." She turned to face the camera that was broadcasting to the entire galaxy. "To the Galactic Council and all who would threaten human freedom, we give you our answer. Earth seals its gates. If you want to treat US as a threat, then we will show you what Earth can really do." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had just declared independence from the galaxy itself. There was no going back now.